This video is brought to you by Dashlane. Dashlane is a one-stop shop for all of your digital identity protection needs. If all your passwords are the same, that's a bad idea. You can use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, making it less likely that your accounts are going to be compromised. They also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can browse the internet securely and confidently, even when you're on public Wi-Fi. But it's not just that, they also actively monitor the dark web to see if your information has been leaked out somewhere. That means that you can go in, change your passwords before anyone breaks into other accounts that share that same username and password. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills out all of those annoying boxes for payment, info, and passwords for you. A lot of Dashlane is free, but there are a few premium upgrades you can buy if you want more from the service. To see if those are right for you, you can get a 30-day free trial, and after that get a 10% discount using our code TodayIFoundOut at dashlane.com/TodayIFoundOut. And let's get into today's video, because today we're answering a viewer question because Hippie asks us, do pets care if you leave the radio on when you leave? A survey of about 2,000 British dog owners conducted in early 2017 found that around 40% of dog owners admitted to leaving the radio on when they left the house so that their dog wouldn't be lonely, while another 32% admitted that they did the same thing, just with the TV. In another British survey done in 2015, it was found that 38% of those respondents left the radio on and that 22% left on the TV. Whichever study you look at there, this practice is shockingly common, at least in Britain. But, well, do your pets like it? Starting with our canine counterparts, while the research we have thus far isn't exactly robust, it would appear that, at least in the case of music, yes, in some cases, dogs do respond to this in a positive way. For example, consider the results of research conducted in 2002 by psychologist Deborah Wells from Queen's University in Belfast. In a nutshell, Wells's study involved randomly playing music through some speakers for a group of about 50 dogs at a rehoming shelter in the UK, and noting what, if any, effect it had on them. After a baseline reaction was found by observing the behavior of the dogs when no music at all was playing, researchers then played one of 3 CDs. For those unfamiliar with that, it's a kind of round, shiny object that people used to store music and other data on way back in the past. Indeed, it was often used for playing music while they hitched up their covered wagons. Each of the CDs they used contained a curated playlist limited to a specific genre, in this case pop, classical, and heavy metal. Finally, a 4th CD contains the sounds of human conversation. So, what were the results? The study found that classical music appeared to have a definite calming effect on the dogs, with there being a noticeable decrease in the amount of noise and activity, and also an increased number of dogs choosing to simply lay down, compared with when there was either complete silence or the sounds of human conversation. On that latter point, it is interesting to note that the human speech didn't seem to make any difference to the dogs. Meanwhile, music by the heavy metal band Metallica seemed to agitate the dogs present. Finally, pop music, which included the likes of Britney Spears, appeared to have no observable effect on the animals. Moving on to a study in 2017 conducted at a shelter operated by the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the researchers attached heart monitors to the dogs to attempt to better determine the effects the music was having on them on top of just visual observation. The results? Professor Neil Evans of the University of Glasgow notes, overall the response to different genres was mixed, highlighting the possibility that, like humans, our canine friends have their own individual music preferences. That being said, reggae music and soft rock showed the highest positive changes. However, beyond potential personal preference, there may actually be something else going on here that is significant in helping to determine which types of music and sounds a given type of dog will like or not. To see why, let's now look at cats. While the studies are limited to date, the data so far seems to indicate that cats do not respond to music nearly as well as dogs, at least at first glance. An important thing to remember here is that the cat's hearing spectrum is different to that of a human. Further, it turns out that what frequencies their brains are tuned to pay attention to are also in a different range. Thus, given both of these things, what they consciously hear when they listen to our music is different than what we hear. Given this and other animal studies that have shown animals tend to respond respond more to sounds within their own vocal range, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, led by psychology professor Charles Snowden, decided to see what would happen if they made cat music, essentially music that was tuned to center in the frequency ranges and tempos that cats pay most attention to. In this case, as cats' vocal range is about 1 octave higher than a human's, they had composer Professor David T. create music in this range. As for tempo, they went with approximately the average rate a cat purrs at, as well as a separate piece of cat music with a tempo equivalent to that of a kitten suckling. As it turns out, when playing this music to 47 cats in the study compared to playing 2 different classical music pieces, the cats did indeed react significantly more positively and pay more attention to the cat music, whereas the human classical music gathered fewer positive responses and reactions, and even those that did react positively to this music took approximately an additional minute to seem to notice it at all. As for the cat music, while not every cat responded, the ones that did tended towards a positive response in the form of purring and sometimes even rubbing up against the speaker playing the music. This may also help explain why it takes so much longer to train a cat to obey verbal commands even when offering a food reward. For example, consider a study done in 1915 at the University of Colorado, which seemed to show that cats were colorblind. In it, the experimenters had one jar wrapped in gray paper and another in color paper. If the cat touched the colored jar, they'd get a tiny fish as a reward. 18 months and 100,000 tries later, the cats used in the study had only been 50% successful at picking the right jar the first time, so clearly they thought they couldn't see color, which would make sense, except it's entirely wrong. Given cats have both cones and rods, further experiments have been done in more modern times using electrodes monitoring the cat's brains. This definitively proved that cats can see colors. So, well, why couldn't they figure out which jar to pick to get the treat they wanted? While you might think it might just be to screw with the researchers, I mean, cats are gonna cat after all, it turns out that even though they can distinguish a variety of shades of color, their brains just aren't really wired to pay attention to colors, though if one spent enough time training a specific cat, you can get them to do so. It just takes an astounding amount of training before the color registers consciously. For example, the aforementioned fish experiment was redone in the 1960s, and this time it was found that if working with an individual cat long and consistently enough, they would learn to pay attention to the color, but it took a whopping average of 1,550 tries per cat for them to learn to pick the colored jar. Once they did, they consistently picked it, as they did indeed want the treat inside. Going back to sounds, this may be why, as any cat owner knows, if you call your cat using super high-pitched vocalization spoken rapidly, like kitty kitty kitty, the cats tend to come more quickly than if just saying the same thing, just speaking in normal tones and speeds where they might not respond at all. Thus, while more experiments would need to be conducted to test the hypothesis, it may be, when talking about verbal commands, that perhaps cats aren't just being as they appear, but rather you're just not speaking in tones and at tempos that their brains naturally consciously pay attention to without significant training. Whatever the case, going back to dogs, it's hypothesized by the researchers of the University of Wisconsin-Madison study that this may be why different dogs respond slightly differently to different types of human music, given that different breeds of dog have different vocal frequency ranges and resting heart rates. If you're curious, breeds like the Labrador have some of the closest vocal ranges and heart rates to humans, with our music likewise generally centered around our vocal ranges and the tempo of our heart rate. On a similar note, a 2010 study also done by Professor Snowden studying cotton-topped tamarin monkeys, whose heart rates are approximately twice a typical human's and their vocalizations are roughly 3 octaves higher, likewise found that music centered around these frequencies and tempos seemed to appeal to the tamarin monkeys, both in their ability to agitate the monkeys and also calm them, depending on the composed pieces of music. Further, the tamarin monkeys had no such responses to human music that was played for them. Moving on to leaving a TV show on for your pet, the hypothesis is that familiar background noises, particularly human speech, will soothe your furry companion. However, the data on whether this actually works or not isn't robust enough to mention, and it is noted in the aforementioned music study that playing sounds of human conversation appeared to have no effect on the dogs compared to silence. Of course, if one played a recording of a dog's master talking, this might change the results, but no study to date that we could find has ever tested this hypothesis. That said, for anyone who has ever used a webcam with a speaker to talk to their pets while away from home knows the animals most definitely respond to this speech, although whether this is enjoyable for them or just a big confusing tease is anyone's guess. On another anecdotal note, in areas where significant outside noises seem to stress a given dog, causing a lot of barking and things like that, many owners claim that drowning out this noise with TV, radio, or a noisemaker seems to help the animals calm down. As for cats and TV, there doesn't seem to be any real data here either, but we're just going to go with the age-old cats don't care, as that seems to apply to our feline friends at least 99.99% of the time, particularly as in this case, what is being shown on TV is not typically within the vocal ranges and tempos of speech that cats otherwise respond to anyway. Cats also, of course, don't typically suffer from separation anxiety to the extent that dogs often do, further perhaps making this not really matter. But to conclude, while the data to date is limited, it does at least so far seem to be pointing to your furry forced friend enjoying it when you leave some music on for them, though for best results you need to tailor the music to the animals, with cats responding best to specially made cat music. And if you're now wondering, yes, this does in fact exist for sale online, and it's thanks to the aforementioned composer, Professor David Tay. Since the cat study, he took part in a subsequent Kickstarter where he raised an astounding $250,000 despite a massively more modest initial goal. He has gone ahead and composed a cat music album for sale online, technically making him the biggest musical star in the world to our feline masters. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, you need to check out our fantastic sponsor Dashlane. They're linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.